Okay, I think we're ready to begin. Let's get
Yay.
started. So, hello everyone, and welcome to P&P Live. My name is Leah, and I'm a bookseller at Politics and Prose, and I have the honor of being your host today. Thank you so much for joining us and tuning in this virtual format, which allows us to continue to bring these amazing authors and their really important books to readers like you. I am so excited to welcome our very special guests today, A.S. King and Nic Stone. So before we begin, if you have a question for our guests, you can click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and add one there. And at the end of our chat, we'll have some time for our guests to answer those questions. You can also click on the link that we're going to drop in the chat box to get your own copies of A.S. King's book, Dig, which is newly out in paperback, yay, and Nic Stone's book, Jackpot, as well as any of their other amazing titles from our website. And of course, thank you all so much for supporting our bookstore and joining us today. So now on to the event you're all waiting for. It is my honor to introduce the extraordinary writer and truth teller, A.S. King. She is the author of many critically acclaimed young adult novels, including The Dust of 100 Dogs, Please Ignore Vera Dietz, which won her a Prince honor. Everyone Sees the Ants, Ask the Passenger, Still Life with Tornado, and the list goes on, all of her amazing books. She's also written several middle grade novels under her name Amy Sarah King, including her newest book, The Year We Fell from Space. Among all the other interesting jobs she's held, she's also a faculty member of Writing for Children and Young Adults MFA program at the Vermont College of Fine Arts. And tonight, we are celebrating the paperback release of her Prince award-winning book, Dig. Congrats. And this surreal mystery pieces together the stories of 5 estranged cousins as they wade through the maze of their toxic family secrets. This novel shines a light on the spectrum of white privilege and the impact of generational inheritance. So it is amazing. You should all read it. Amy is going to be joined tonight by the fabulous and amazingly talented Nic Stone.
Oh my gosh, you're just way too kind.
You are. And Nic is the author of several best-selling YA novels, including the amazing Dear Martin, Odd One Out, Jackpot, and the highly anticipated Dear Justice. Her work has also been included in many short story collections, including the amazing collection Black Enough. And also, like Amy, she's written several middle grade novels, including Clean, Getaway, and her newest, Shuri, in the Black Panther world. So now it is my honor to pass it over to Amy and Nic. The virtual stage is yours.
Thanks,
Oh, hi, favorite.
Hi, gorgeous. What's going on?
I am, of course, Jazz, to be talking to you again, like twice in 1 week. What is this life that I'm getting to live? It is massively an honor and privilege to talk to you again.
It's like a second chance to not babble as much as I did last time. I was so coming off that Prince ceremony, man, but maybe it's just me and I'm way too critical of myself. That could be the case.
Yes.
I thought it was a great conversation though, and it was great, but I think maybe I just wished it was 5 hours long, you know.
Yes, I agree. And also don't give in to white perfectionism, which is something we're going to talk about in relationship to this book. So we're in a weird time in this country. Well, weird maybe isn't the right word. It's about time to be in this time with regard to race, racism, race relations, etc. Mm-hmm. And you have written a book that is about family. It's about perspectives, but it's also very heavily about racism from a perspective we don't get to see very often. And that's like the perspective of white teenagers dealing with thoughts and concepts and basically dealing with the concept of white supremacy. Yeah. I asked you this the other night and I'm going to ask it again because I think it's important that people hear where this book came from and why you decided to write it, because you wrote it a couple years ago. What, 5 years ago? Has it been what, 2000?
Started it 5 years ago, 5, 4?
Yeah.
5, because it came out last year. I started it probably 5 years ago. Yeah, it's about 3.5 year long journey writing that book. So yeah, it's probably 5 years ago now. Wow.
Was there anything specific going on in current events when you started, or it was just like, I just need to tell this story?
This has haunted me my whole life. Race,
yeah.
Racism, being white, and what to do in a white town and a white county, and just kind of how I don't know, like I've been grappling with the question. When we talked the other night, I explained to you that I was very grateful to have anti-racist parents. And I mean, especially at that time, anti-racist, I think in 1970 something means a little bit different than anti-racist now. We grow, we learn, maybe, but it still means anti-racist. So I was lucky for that. I was lucky just for the conversations around race. Versus even just like the blowing it off, like, oh, racist, no, we're not like that, and then just leaving it there. No, my folks, they talked about it, and that was cool. But I've always just wrestled with it, and mostly, like, I guess I was coming into the book, I wanted to write about whiteness. I wanted to write about why it was important. And like I said to you, I had a weird I went rogue on purpose at a school that I know, and I asked the white students in the room to I didn't ask them anything. I just said, I'm talking to you. I want you to hear me. You're white. And that means something. And what does that mean? And let's discuss it. And no giggling. Take a minute to really think about what it means to be white, like what it really means. But I mean, had things been going on, oh my gosh, look at all the guests. I mean, how long ago was he here? Tamir Rice was 5 years ago. Wasn't he 4?
Yeah.
He'd be
6.
Yeah.
2014. I
right.
think.
So it's
2013, 2014. Yeah.
It's always going on. And it's like, I don't know. I wanted to explore it from the white. I wanted to help white people. Maybe like that's kind of, I feel like I wrote it compassionately in a way because I want to try and help them understand it and help them see it. I mean, that's one of the things I did want to talk to you tonight about, if we get into it, that sort of more, because there are like over whites, like cross burning racists in this book. You don't really see them that much, right? And I think that's kind of why I did that, because those are the ones that are like, whoa, they're the ones that are on, TV, they're on Jerry Springer, they're all these places, but the ones that make the decisions and are in charge, don't think they're racist, first of all.
And the ones that have all the money
and all
typically
the money
don't think they're racist.
I have no idea. No.
Yeah. So
it came from just wanting to explore it, see if I could come up with an answer. And when we talked the other night, it comes through characters. So every one of these characters, very different places. They're all coming from different places. There's 9 different characters. And there's more. Well, there's 9 different main characters who have points of view. Then we have secondary characters. But they're all in different spaces of racism or grappling with racism. So are their parents and all that stuff. So and that's kind of what I wanted to show. I kind of wanted to show white young people, and white people are really of any age, that, you know what, you do have to grapple with this, and then you have to make a decision.
Yeah, I agree. We talked about it, but like my favorite thing about this book is the ways that you show the varying manifestations of racism and white supremacist racism, like the idea of white people being inherently better than everybody else. It's something that you tackle in this book from so many angles. And I'm thankful for that, because I know when I hand this to a white kid who's like, well, I'm not racist, they're going to find themselves in this book somewhere. How deliberate is the shifting, is the like hitting as many perspectives as possible? Or is it just a thing that happens organically?
Just happens organically. Like that's one of the frustrating things about me as an interviewee ever, because I don't make too many choices. Like the characters show up, and I kind of shut myself off and let it come in here. I become receptive versus trying to put this on the page, because that's just crazy. You've heard me talk in circles. So I try and let it come in here and come out my hands. And so, I mean, Marla and Gottfried came straight away, same day as Bill and Jake. Boom, 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 boom. And Bill and Jake were based off 2 people I knew in my school days and beyond. And then just the rest just sort of, I don't know where it came from. I have no idea, but I know that once it came, I was really interested and I wanted to figure out what was going on.
Yeah. You have this very powerful way of being very deliberate and truthful about the ways that people hurt each other. How hard are these books to write? Because this isn't the first book I've read of yours where I was like, oh God, I need to go take a CBD bath. Like, I need to relax. But it comes from knowing that these are very real things happening. Like I read some of the stuff in the book, like even Jake and Bill's relationship and what we discover about their relationship toward the end of the novel. While it wasn't surprising after having read through the whole book and seeing the interesting way that they're brothers, but the interesting way that their relationship functioned and kind of the hero worship that was going on there, it wasn't surprising, but it was painful, right? So like, I wonder also, as a person who writes really painful, hard stuff in books, is it hard, first of all? And like, what do you do to like not fall to pieces? Like, this is something we could probably talk about for a while.
Well, I don't know. Okay. All right. It's really quite simple. I learned to intellectualize my emotions at a pretty young age. And then in my 20s, I absolutely learned how to intellectualize my emotions. And because that's when I started writing books. I didn't have an outlet for them. It wasn't working out. I was in a foreign country, very isolated, very kind of not grounded. And so I happened to have a typewriter. It was a Swedish typewriter. So it had like 4 A's on it, which was really cool. I want to see a Swedish keyboard again, just so I can remember that I'm not BSing about that. But I know I'm not, because I used to put the ones with little umlauts on them. It was cool. Anyway, and so that's how I express my emotions. So for me, I mean, I cry when I write, but I have to say I emote, but not a huge amount. I mean, somebody asked me, did I want to take a shower after some of the scenes with Loretta? And I thought, no, I wanted her to burn the dress. And I did. And so in a way, maybe every character that's doing something that's healthy is really just me getting healthier.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And I think even with Loretta, and so Loretta is a character, for those who have not read Dig, first of all, get your life together. That's the first piece here. But Loretta is one of these 5 cousins, and she is living in what I would definitely consider kind of dire circumstances. But what she has learned to do is dissociate from these circumstances in a myriad of ways. She actually, Malcolm's my favorite. I think Loretta is number 2 for me. But the thing about Loretta's story specifically, you handle her situation with such care, right? I didn't feel at any point when reading her story, as a person who has spent some time in a household where there was domestic abuse, at no point did I feel triggered or like there was anything exploitative about the way you wrote this character's story. And I guess my question here is, how do you balance really hard, ugly truth with human dignity and making sure your characters are able to maintain a sense of their own humanity?
Well, I think we'll use Loretta as an example because we're talking about her. But like with her, I mean, this is where the surrealism, or in the case of like, if a book already has a surrealist bent, then you can have Loretta live her life as on a stage in her mind. So disassociate completely, and feel the innocence and feel the like racism isn't even on her radar yet. It's not even like, she is too busy with severe violence going on in her house and trying to navigate that. How I do that, I don't know. I think it's because I've also, been in that situation. So I want to try and use compassion again and try and let people understand, because I mean, I hang out with teens. I'm around with teens. I have that, and I've heard people, kids, they always say kids are cruel. I don't think they are. Kids are cruel. Let's be fair.
They can be. Yeah,
adults they can be. Too. I don't know why it's just kids.
Adults are worse. Like, adults are way worse.
Way worse. Or they've learned to hide it. Yeah. But like, for me, I don't know. Loretta she was so innocent that and so simple. She had her flea circus. She was happy.
She's like a literal flea circus, which because it was a surrealist book, at first I was like, wait, is this a metaphor? Right. And then it wasn't. And I was just, I love you, and I love your books, and I love your work, and I love how you put things together and how you tell stories. Sorry.
Cool.
Why am I apologizing for giving you a compliment? I don't know.
Like, it's okay. It's all fine. Don't feel bad. No, thank you. And the surrealism is what does it, right? So if you've got really topics, hardcore topics, for me, having that little bit of magic, having that little bit of something really takes the edge off it. So even though, so there's Loretta, but if the next chapter is the freak, it would be like, ooh, the freak. And she's all capping me again. So she's yelling at me or whatever. She's saying something, she's still a mystery, right? So she's trying to put together the mystery.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it's a matter of timing. I mean, it was written in order. So maybe I write the freak after I write a Loretta scene so that I don't feel a certain way.
Yeah.
I don't know why it works that way, but so far, so good. Plus, I mean, I do have a insanely good editor who would say, yeah, this is too much. I think if he really thought that. I don't know if Andrew would ever think something was too much, but
yeah, with the freak, because so one of the things I found interesting about her, I'm trying to think, was there ever a point where she was seen by an adult? I'm pretty sure the only people that saw her were all kids. I'm trying to, like, I know, did Marla Gottfried never saw her?
Well, we can't say that, but the very last, I accidentally read the last chapter the other day because it was sitting here, and Gottfried does,
my book.
He refers, it's like the last, I think it's the very last page, but he's very, very sneaky about saying it. He knows.
Oh, you're right. I see it
right at the very end. And I don't know, like, if he so much guessed it or if it was really birds or what, but I don't even know if adults saw her. No, I don't think they did in this book. No, I mean, even at the Arby's scene when she goes in to get the lukewarm roast beef, there's no adult around.
No, which is powerful. Like, and even if even if it wasn't deliberate. So when I go into into spaces and high schools specifically, when I go into high schools, and I'll have, inevitably there's that kid who's like, so, you know, our English teachers make us pick it apart and ask about the theme and the symbolism, et cetera, et cetera. Like, is that stuff on purpose? And I say no, because for me it isn't. And it's clear that it's also not necessarily on purpose for you, but there's still meaning there, right? And I love the fact that, like, in books, especially books written for young people, there are so many ways to make meaning. What was deliberate? Like, what is, like, one thing that was very deliberate that you really hope people pick up on?
The potatoes were very deliberate, but like we talked the other night, they were put in. I knew about them the whole time I was, and the potatoes, the potatoes weren't deliberate. The potatoes made me chase them because they were in the first scene, they were in the second scene, they were in the third scene. Everybody kept eating potatoes. So next thing you know, I'm on the Wikipedia page for all different potato recipes from all over the world. And then pierogi were missing. I almost, like, I should have gone in there and just, like, doctored it. But either way, pierogi aren't there, which makes no sense because that's, like, heavenly potato stuff. But anyway, and I just
aren't they? Yes, they are. Malcolm talks about making pierogies.
They're not. At least when I checked, they weren't on the Wikipedia list of potato dishes.
Oh, they're not on the list. Okay, I thought you were saying they weren't in the book, and I'm like, yes, they are. This is one of my favorite parts. Okay, go ahead.
Chip buddies from Ireland or from, I don't know who they gave chip buddies to. They might have given them to England, whatever. But, like, basically French, or chips. Sorry, but, you know, French fries, proper chip, you know what I mean. In bread, that was in there, and a pierogi wasn't. I was so confused. Anyway, I just started looking into potatoes, and then I started reading, and then I started reading more. And by the time I was done with the book, I knew that potatoes had caused the white supremacy. I knew that the reason the Northern European race was so unbelievably strong and had such great numbers and was literally bigger, you know, just in that place, strong, healthy, because of about a century and a half, 2 centuries of eating potatoes, the most nutritional plant still per square inch. It's just what it is. So that was absolutely intentional in revision, because I wanted to get it in there, but I didn't want it to feel shoehorned. I didn't know what to do with it, and the freak gave me a really great way to stick it in there, which is cool.
Yeah, and even, like, dirt burrito and this idea of things being underground, like, the motifs and the themes are very clear and evident in this piece of writing, and it actually just makes me feel really good to hear that, like, none of it's actually on purpose. It's just, this is what came out.
No, and then what's great about it is that in the years after, you can really think about it, because people like you ask really smart questions, and I can think, like you just said, underground, how much of that book takes place, or at least the motif or the feeling of being underground.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
tunnels, yes.
And that, to me, is where most racism really lives. You will find it's one thing to have someone being an outward racist. That person is proud of that. That's who they are. I've never been able to argue them down. But the people that I find that are are almost harder. They're harder to reach because they will write you, let's say they run a school, okay? Or let's say that they're I don't know, whatever. They're in charge of writing that letter about the outrage or standing with the Black community after the murder of George Floyd. So they're going to write the most eloquent letter. But the thing is that 4 months before, that same person, was pulling another white guy into his office. I'm totally telling a story now. So there's this guy, he's a white dude, and he thinks he's not racist. And that's almost all of us. That's probably all of us, because we're always having to get this out of our boat. I mean, we live in this thing that fills up our boat all the time. So you have to keep questioning all the thoughts that you have. Anyway, so he's there. And my husband started teaching. He went to college when he was 42. He grew up poor in Dublin, in Ireland, and came to America. He was a cabinet maker his whole life. His arm kind of failed on him, so he went to college and wanted to be a teacher. Always wanted to be an English teacher. So he became an English teacher, and he taught in city schools in York City, Pennsylvania, for 5 years. And the school that he was in closed, so he had to move to another school, and that's cool. And this dude used to like to kind of take him down a few pegs every week in a, I'm superior, you're inferior kind of meeting. And the one thing he said to him one time was, blew my mind, was, working in those city schools didn't really teach you how to be a teacher. You were probably just a guidance counselor to those kids. Now, when he told me that story, he was like, can you believe he said that to me? And I'm like, say that again. Can you say that again, please? And it was sort of like, that's super racist. And it wasn't that we didn't know that, because people, like the other thing, I mean, there's already a stigma with having more people in schools. I'm getting an echo.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. And so with even in the beginning, it was like, oh, don't work in a city school, because then you're never going to get to work in a suburban school. And of course, my husband really enjoyed, like he was, they called him old head, right? Because he's a gray guy. He was from Ireland. So he's an immigrant too. So he gets to have these interesting conversations, being like, I'm white, but like I'm old. And they ended up calling him old head. And
I'm an old head, right? I can totally hear this whole thing happening.
And he'd come home and be like, they called me my old head today. And I'd be like, I'm sorry, I am a white chick who grew up there. What's that mean?
I don't know what that means.
And like he just gotta, check. They still stay in touch. He's invited to baby showers and weddings and this and that and parties. And what a great experience. And then to have this guy weaponize that experience in order to put him down was such an interesting, sort of look at, like, there's someone who really thinks that they're not a racist, and they just said that, and they really are. How do I get that through to them unless they're listening to us right now?
I sure hope so. Just saying. My experience like this, I actually put into Dear Martin. So my senior year of high school, it was like, I was the only Black kid in 6 of 7 classes. Yeah. And this was AP Language and Composition. And I'm talking to a girl in my class about, I had my interview with Duke University coming up, and I was nervous about it. So we started talking about schooling and test scores. She was a little taken aback that I was interviewing with Duke. She was like, really? And I don't remember exactly how we started talking about test scores, but as it turns out, my ACT composite score was 2 points higher than this girl's. And she looked me right in the face and went, there's no way you got a higher score than me. And like, it was one of those moments where I'm like, you have no idea that you just expressed one of the foundational white supremacist thoughts that honestly keeps racism alive. You have just expressed, like, your belief that because of my skin color, I am not capable of doing better on a standardized test than you are. Like, you believe yourself to be inherently smarter than I am because you're white and I'm Black. And there are so many people who have this mindset, which brings me back to the book, because I think about Marla. Yeah. And I think about the way that Marla moves through the world. Marla has very little compassion. We were talking about compassion earlier and how you are a compassionate person. And so you handle your characters with an astonishing amount of compassion, even the ones who are kind of trash. Like there are some characters in this book that I was like, how the hell did Amy manage to redeem this person? Like, I honestly have pity for this person who I think if I had met on the street, I would probably want to punch in the face. But Marla is one of those characters. I want to know from your perspective why you think there are a lot of white people who just struggle with compassion as a concept, right? Why do you think in our kind of racist society, there are white people who struggle with compassion, who struggle to be compassionate, who just have no compassion whatsoever?
I think that comes from shame. I'm going to throw it straight out there. Embarrassment, shame. I think it comes from an underlying, and it's not the kind of shame that they, not the shame we're kind of talking about, like that, I missed the boat. Like I'm white and I just realized it and I'm 40 or whatever it is. Like, and oh gosh, and maybe hey, just correcting myself from the other night. I said Karen was an incel word. It's totally not. But to me, it feels like one because it's just like those other two. And I don't know what's wrong with me about that. But Karen is not an incel word. That is total BS. It's in my head. Yeah. So my apologies. But anyway, if you're at that point and you're trying to face yourself, I think the best way to do it is, with compassion. But as for, what'd you ask again, Nick? You asked a great question.
I asked, like, why do you feel that there are white people who lack the ability, it seems, to be compassionate?
And shame. Yeah, I think it's shame and embarrassment. And I think part of it is that somewhere along their life, because white perfection, I'm going to bring you back into it because you just said this earlier. I think the idea of perfection or feeling perfect, having to look perfect as a family, that kind of thing, is such a big deal. And so I mean, I don't know how this is in Black families because I'm not in one, but like there's that sort of like, oh, well, did you see, like, or if you do this, then my brother so-and-so will be, he'll be better because you made a mistake, and there's always like a keeping of tabs, like, well, who got married after they had a baby and who got married before they had a baby, and all this weird old school patriarchy bullshit, excuse my French, that's already built in. So the shame for women's already there, but for dudes, I think it's even bigger because they have white dudes have this massive need to be, I don't even know what it is. I've been here 50 years and I cannot figure, maybe that's what my next book will be about.
You know what? I actually do have some insight into this because I talked to a lot of white dudes about it. I had a conversation with Brendan Kiley probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. I did this live series on Instagram called Let's Talk About Race. And he was one of the people that I talked to. Shouts to Brendan. He and Jason are like number 2 on the bestseller list this week with All American Boys. But he brought up Indiana Jones, and him talking about Indiana Jones made so many things click for me when it comes to white dudes and being kind of the pinnacle. Straight cis white dudes are kind of the pinnacle of American society. Our society was founded by these men and they set the standard. And he was talking about Indiana Jones and how because the images he saw of white men when he was younger were always of something heroic, there's almost this like pressure to be Indiana Jones. And I kind of wonder how much of it comes from that, this pressure to like meet the ideal.
Right. And then there's immediate shame already because who's going to be Harrison Ford? Who's going to be Indiana Jones? That's like me aiming to be name your actress. It doesn't work that way, right? Like, and I also think that the other thing that might be really, this might be kind of a link, is that from what I can tell, men aren't prepared to enter the world of women. Straight men, funny enough, aren't really prepared for that. We don't have a sex ed program for the most part that's consistent, right? So we all know what sex ed is now. It's internet porn, and if you're listening and you don't agree with me, really read some books about that because that's
please do, yes.
Right? But I think that when they come into a relationship and they're wrong for the first time, it blows their minds. And sometimes actually that, like, to this, I'm married 28 years, Nick, 28 years, which is nuts, right? And we still remember that one time that it was just like, I said one thing that wasn't even weird. And it was just like, And he's like, I don't know what happened to me. And we're still looking at it. And he's going, that's what happened to me. It was shame. And so I'll give you his experience as a 52-year-old man. That was shame. And it was like an embarrassment that he was ill prepared for this. Why anyone thinks that they're born being prepared for everything is beyond me. But why are we as humans? Like, and are white people more with that perfectionism thing, or, well, we have to look better. We have to have a score, an ACT score better than Nic Stone, or whatever it is. Where the heck did that come from? I mean, I don't have, like, I would not have said that to you about my SAT scores, but you would have blown it out of the water anyway. But like, where does that come from? And I think it comes from, I don't know.
I think it comes from white supremacy. I think it comes from this idea that's rooted in like long before the United States even came into existence. There was this idea that like, oh, you do things different than we do. Mm-hmm. We have something that you don't have simply because this isn't a thing that you value. So we are better than you. And as people who are better than you, who have things like gun power, who can decide that we are going to come in and we are going to take over, like the colonizer mindset comes from white supremacy. And I think a lot of this white perfectionism does come from the idea of white supremacy and the idea of white people are supposed to be good at everything. Right? And I say this even as a kid. The first time I encountered white people, for an extended period of time, I was 7 years old. So like I spent birth through first grade. I was in a part of Atlanta where there just really weren't very many white people. Right. It was excellent. Like my grandfather was the superintendent of the schools that I went to, which was awesome. But then the minute I found myself around white people, I had no doubt who ruled the roost. Like instantly, I didn't have to talk to them. It's like you see them, and the messaging we get from society has taught us those are the people in charge. Those are the people who are smart. Those are the people who have all the money. So whether or not those things are true, honestly, doesn't really matter at first. It takes picking them apart and coming to recognize like the things that we think automatically need to be less automatic. That's what I think anyway. Yeah. That's my perception.
I think you're right. I mean, and it is the white supremacy. And so that's the entitlement then, right? Because that's the expectation. And so I don't know, and America was the first, from what I understand, America was the first place to write racial laws. 1680 something, they wrote in the word white in a law. And from that point forward, and I didn't know this until recently, and it's not my information, and I didn't look it up, but I learned it from a grad lecture up at BCFA. But I didn't realize that classic, like I'm going to bungle this, but if you think about Latin teacher teaching ancient Greece and Rome and all of this stuff in ancient, sort of that part of Europe, the southern part of Europe, that area of Europe had many people of color in it. But now the teaching of it is completely whitewashed. And she did her research and she went back and found out that it was actually the transatlantic slave trade that changed the teaching of European history. And the whitewashing of European history was done after this thing. So I was like, wow, like how many things did we affect when we stormed into this place, decided to just be like, this is our place now. And, oh, by the way, we're going to get rich. So how do we do that? Oh, the Dutch have an idea. And England's going to take it over, and it's going to be great. And, but yeah, you're right. It's the expectation, and it's the same as like men do not expect to have. And I don't mean to compare the two; they're two very different, but they're similar in the way that they're old and they're hard to break. But men don't expect you to. Brendan actually said something so smart in that talk with you that I walked around with it for days. When he said something about how his wife came to him, and he knows to listen to his wife because he knows she's had to think about the thing and she has it well thought out. And so when she comes to him, he listens to her. And I wanted to call her and ask her for her magic. Like, what's with that? Because I still have to do like 5 serious meetings about the decision. so that someone will listen. And the first time I was well prepared, and he wasn't. And this isn't me like dogging him Topher. I love him. He's upstairs. He's fantastic. But he knows these things go on. It's just so interesting. It's the same idea. Like they just expect us to bring them bad ideas or dumb ideas, which is insane.
Yeah.
You know, any women, we don't usually do that. We've had to think about it like 19 times before we even open our mouths. And that's a white woman. So I can only imagine what it's like to be a black woman.
I mean, honestly, the analogy isn't terrible because there is a similar thing that happens with race and with racism. And honestly, you nail it with the black characters in this book. I said this the other night, and I'm going to say it again because I'm sure there are people here who weren't watching the other night. The black characters who appear in this book are fantastic. And part of the reason they're fantastic is because number one, they have agency. Number two, they are beautifully well-rounded. And number three, they make these power moves that like, I started writing young adult fiction at 27. And I didn't start writing young adult fiction until the first time I saw a black character who I could identify with live through the end of a series. I had never seen it happen until Veronica Ross Divergent. Never. It had never happened. Like Hunger Games, the black people are dead in first book. Like I can name series after series after series where there either are no people of color, especially in a dystopia where I'm like, so black people can't survive apocalypses? Is that what's going on here? But you don't do that. And the flip side though is the token character. So like I've read a lot, unfortunately, of white authored young adult fiction where the black person is just dropped in there so that there's a black person in the book and they're like they're just full of stereotypes, some kind of caricature. There's one book in particular that has come to mind that I won't name because I'm trying not to be petty, but the black character in this book is like this athletic manho. Okay. And I was like, you can't do better than that? And then in the next book, you have this trio of brothers who in the original draft of the novel were referred to as Tom, Huck, and Jim. And I'm like, nobody caught this? I don't understand. So to read a book written by a white person that is about racism and the black people in the book are like a Jamaican girl who's determined to be the first prime minister, a black boy, a biracial black boy who's like, you know what? I can't rock with this thing that is not benefiting me anymore. And a teacher who's basically like, listen, the reason the world is like this is because of this plant. Learn you something. That means so much to me. So thank you for that. How do you make sure, and maybe make sure is not the right term to use here, when you are writing characters who are not white, how do you go about making sure they're not harmful?
Wow. That's tough because I mean these guys weren't my first people of color in a book, but
nope.
And I guess I try and make them as real as I can. I make sure, like a lot of times, you know, how first drafts are messy. So I'll throw out the first draft idea and it won't be very pretty looking and it definitely isn't right. Like it's just not right. And it's not even what I wanted to write, but at least the scene's on the page. The plot, we'll say, is on the page. And then I just think about what I want. Like for Ian, I just like, what do I want for Ian? What do I really want for Ian? What do I want for him? And I'm like, I want him to get the heck out of there. And I want him to have a Volvo. That's what I want. And, you know, that's what I want. I want him to have a Volvo and get out of there. And that's exactly what he did. But that's only after, you know, a good bit of thought about it. And it's hard. And then, I talk to people, but honestly, in a way, asking people what to do with my own book, Nick, you can't do that. You have to figure it out yourself. So for me, the other night when I fell back in my chair and went, I was relieved because I didn't know if I nailed it or not. And I think it's also a matter of like, it is subjective to a point. Like some people might be offended by Eleanor, some people might not. But for me, it was just a matter of making sure that they got that those characters got what they needed. Not to say everybody in the book, but I wanted to give everybody in the book what they needed, even if it was just one step closer to, I don't know, something.
I'm just going to cut in. I'm sorry. I could listen to you guys talk forever, masterclass. So thank you both so much. We just wanted to have a little bit of time to get some questions. Thank you both so much so far. Are you guys ready to hear some of our questions from the audience?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes. Okay. So, and everybody else, there's still time to drop some more in the Q&A on the bottom, and you can also upvote ones that you really want us to get to, so it'll go to the top of my list. So my first question is from Margaret, and Margaret asks, is Dig available in other languages or countries, and what is the reaction to the book been in any of these other countries?
Dig is available just in Australia, New Zealand, which also is UK, Ireland, through Text Publishing, my Australian publisher. I was very lucky to land with them with one book, and we kind of fell in love with each other, and I love them, and I can't wait to go back one day. It's also available soon in Slovakian, and that's it at the moment. But I haven't gotten Australia, New Zealand. Yeah, they've absolutely given it love. The Irish Times reviewed it, which was pretty great because the New York Times didn't. So it was lovely to see what the paper that I was a writer with, you know what I mean? Like my paper, I do the Irish Times crossword every day. So it's sort of like, that was cool. But outside of that, none yet.
I know that you both lived abroad, so is it interesting looking at your books and having lived abroad to kind of seeing those topics in different light or how they view what's going on as well?
I don't know. It's kind of living abroad was like, well, living in Ireland, I mean, especially when I moved there, I mean, there's a question for you. Here's one for you, Nick. And he meant it in the nicest way. I mean, this is one of the nicest, most benevolent humans I've ever met, but an elderly fella in my family, so like 80 some at the time, asked me, were there any Black people in Ireland? Like, should he be worried when I moved there? I was like 24 or 23. And I go, no, actually, I don't think there are many, no, at all. And it's, oh, that's good. And then, of course, leaving Ireland, like it was so different because the immigration had come in, you know, whatever. But it is a little bit different. It's always kind of fun to have that different angle, because I never thought I'd move back to America. And then the America I moved back into makes you want to leave, but also makes you want to stay and make more signs. I go, here's my signs to help your country do something. So, which is funny. Yep. I look at Ireland and like, I think I left there and like when they were voting on same-sex marriage, I was like, not the Ireland I left. And then they went and voted it in. I'm like, that's why am I not living there? Because I look at my husband like, this was your idea to move back to America. Damn it.
How dare you?
But yeah, I hope that answered the question. But yeah, I mean, living abroad, living anywhere else, not just vacationing, but living is absolutely changes your perspective on a lot of things.
So many things. I lived in Israel. My first kid was born there. And it's funny, it's the one country where like none of my books are published. Like, and I'm like, how I speak and read this language and I don't have any books in this language. Give me a book in this language. But yeah, it does definitely broaden the perspective. And it's wild. I have gotten an interesting perspective on racism just from living in other places. It's everywhere. Anti-Black racism exists everywhere, even in Africa, where people were colonized. And so there's a lot of self-hatred, you know, like anywhere that white people have touched, that Europeans have touched, there is anti-Black racism. And it was, that was the case in Israel too. So like, it's been an interesting ride, having so much of like my journey be focused on this one topic. Yay. I don't want to go back there though. I'm fine in Atlanta. It's cool.
Well, we still need you guys to stay here and write these amazing books. Let's take another question. The next one is from Eileen. Eileen asks, hi, Nick and Amy, great conversation. Amy, it's great to see you talk about Dig at PMP again. Here is my analogy. The thing about potatoes is that they will sprout and multiply themselves if left unpicked. And racism, unless confronted, will also sprout and multiply and grow. My question is, what questions do white teens ask you about Dig?
First of all, hello, Eileen, you're awesome, and I think you rock. And I can picture you right now in your big smile. First day I met you. I don't think any have asked me any questions in that way. I think they ask, hold on, no, that could be total. I totally Zoomed with a classroom last night. Give me a second. No, they had questions. Most of them were similar to like, like, how did you come to this? How did you figure this out? How did you know about this? Mostly it's commentary. I got a good few thank yous last night. Like, I never thought about this. Thank you for putting this on my radar. Biggest bit of feedback is, how did you know about my family? How did you know about my family? And it doesn't matter if you're 70 or 14. I have letters. I actually made little things so that the two of them were next to each other. And one said, I am 72 years old and I live in wherever, I can't remember where it was, I think it was Southwest. And that was the question. How did you know my family? How do you, where did you get this information? And how did you do this? This is my family. And then exact same letter from a 14-year-old. And so I think that was my point. I mean, that's the whole point, right? To be seen in a book. And even if you're seeing the toxic things that surround you, right? Whatever it is, if you can see it in a book, that's a better thing. So, but the questions they ask are usually the same kind of mechanics questions. I got a really good one last night, though, and I cannot remember it for the life of me. If I remember it, I'll bring it up, Eileen, but I can't remember right now.
Well, I think we have time for one more before we have to start wrapping up. So this is also one I love to end with, one of the ones. So this is from Mary Quattlebaum. And Mary asks, great conversation, Amy and Nick. Thank you so much. What are you working on at the moment, and any new books coming out soon?
You go, Nick.
Working on a book that comes out February 2nd and was due a couple months ago. Oops. It is the second book in the Shuri series with Marvel Comics. And my next book comes out September 29th. It is the follow-up to Dear Martin. It is called Dear Justice and is a book about racism, the way that as it manifests in the juvenile justice system and the school to prison pipeline. Hey, there it is. That's it.
School to prison pipeline is, man, until Mr. King started working in city
so
school.
Fun.
I didn't see it. I didn't know it. I knew about it, but I didn't understand what it was. And then I went, they did what today? They did who today? What? That's not discipline. That's military. What are they doing to those kids in that school? And then I really realized what they were doing. I do a lot of juvie visits. I go to a lot of juvenile detention centers, and it's just sort of one of those things.
Same.
But it's one of those things that, can you imagine? I'm just this blonde, bleached out chick who shows up, and I'm just like, I'm just a white lady. And they're like, yeah, what are you here for? And I'm like, I'm not here to inspire you. I'm not here to do anything. I'm here to ask you questions. I don't know. And I asked them, what are you going to do when you get out of here? What are you doing? But anyway, okay, so cool.
Yep.
The question for me, let's see, what am I working on now? I just handed in a book that'll come out in May. It's called Switch. And it's about the after effects of a very toxic family member in a family. So it's really an aftermath story, if that makes sense. But it's also about how time stopped on June 23rd, 2020, which is weird because that was just this week and nothing happened. I'm pretty sure time's still going. But and the effects 9 months on of living without time. And it's also about, family trying. Basically, I stick a family in a house and I have to rescue them. That's pretty much what all my books end up being, right? A family that I need to rescue somehow and figure out what happens. I have not explained that book well yet. And my editor's probably saying, oh man, I don't know how else to say it. But it's also about a girl who throws a javelin insane distances. So that's always cool too. And I'm working on a middle grade book as well about activism and actually speaking up, anti-racism, actually from a white point of white character, and being very open about it, which is funny because his best friend is anxious, and so he freaks his best friend out all the time by not shutting up, and that's going to be fun. And but that is really about censorship, which happened in my school district just up the road. They just keep giving me material. No offense to them, they're a great school district, but people are people. But I'm working on that too.
Yeah, facts.
Thank you guys so much. I wish we had more time to get to more questions, sorry.
I have one thing, Leah. I just want to say to people, look, if you have the next hour, you've got to go over to Instagram, check out Nic Stone. Who are you talking to tonight, Nick?
I'm talking to Wyatt O'Rourke. He is the current, he was just named Teacher of the Year for Baltimore City Schools.
Right on. And
yes, so I'm doing these conversations with educators about decolonizing the classroom and bringing anti-racism into curriculum and into classroom culture.
Yeah, they're amazing. Definitely check it out.
They're fantastic, and it's just something. We got to start. We got to start young. Same. I'm on the SEL thing. I want to teach kids how to be compassionate and how to it's okay to have emotions, so that guys don't grow up being embarrassed because they cry.
Yep.
Anymore. And that was the love of Gracie's, my daughter's, and that was her thing. And so it was like, okay, that's how I'm gonna honor her, right? So that's kind of what I want to do.
Yeah.
And anti-racism work is the exact same. It has to start as young, beginning, like the very beginning.
Absolutely.
So, thanks so much for having us, Leah. I know you have to go because you got to meet somebody in a few minutes.
Yeah, we don't want to keep it too long. Yeah, but so many, everybody added so many great questions. So thank you so much. And everybody shouted out how amazing this conversation was. So again, Amy and Nick, thank you for your time and for your amazing words and sharing your books and your writing with us. And of course, many thanks to all you taking your time and watching this today. And all contributing to these amazing authors as well as our bookstore. And don't forget, you can still click that link in the chat to get your own copy of paperback or hardcover of Dig, as well as Nick's amazing books, including Jackpot. And to find out more about our upcoming events, definitely check our website out we have so many great other ones coming up, as well as our older ones we still have up online, some great conversations. And follow us online, check out both Nick and Amy on their handles as well, posting such amazing things. And thank you all again so much. I hope that you all continue to have these really important dialogues and really challenge ourselves. So I hope you all keep reading widely and expand your world, and I hope you all stay safe. So thank you so much again.
Love it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Y'all have an excellent night.
In a minute.
Maybe I'll see you on Instagram.
Check it out. It's really good stuff.
Dig it.
Dig it. Oh my gosh.
Dig it.